We are running a little bit late, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone will join us and um, just waiting a couple more minutes. But we're going live on Facebook actually right now, and probably that's when we can start our peace meeting. Salam, shalom, welcome everyone. Special welcome to Imam Abdullah and Rabbi Michael for joining us today for this very important conversation. My name is Lika Torikashvili. I'm one of the founders of UN Youth Delegate Alumni Network. The main goal for this network is to unite young leaders, current and previous UN Youth Delegates from all over the world, so that together we can tackle and find solutions to some of the world's most complex issues. The reason why we wanted to host this conversation today is that the world is really polarized these days, and there are a lot of uncomfortable topics to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. One of them. The reason why we wanted to host this call is that the recent events in the Middle East sparked a lot of hatred amongst young people. And we noticed that young people are skeptical of peace. They are skeptical about peace between Israel and Palestine, and we hear a lot that they don't see the possibility of peace happening at all. And the most concerning part is that even young leaders and young youth delegates who walked in the corridors of the United Nations, of the institution that is created to make peace and use diplomacy for peace, even these young people do not see the possibility of peace these days. And that's what alarmed us most of all. And that's what inspired us to host this event today, to invite you, Imam Abdullah, and Rabbi Michael, to show us that there is a possibility of peace, because in this network, we refuse to believe that in the 21st century, where we are already preparing to fly to Mars, and we have this much development in the world, we refuse to believe that made conflict cannot be resolved. We see a lot of hatred, we see a lot of polarization amongst young people. Young people think that by supporting one side and violently opposing the other side, they are helping make justice, which is unfortunately not the case, because hatred and violence only causes more complications and makes peace even more impossible. So we hope that after today's meeting, we will see the possibilities of peace, and we will be able to move forward from who is right and who is wrong, or which side do you support. We understand that this is a very complex issue. There is a dual narrative that we often hear. No matter how hard you try to study history, there is still this polarization. There are different historical contexts. Different historians look at different time frames of when the conflict started. And it is very difficult for young people to understand how to move forward. And in hopes of you helping us, we are hosting this event today. I would like to introduce the speakers that are going to help us with this topic today. Rabbi Michael Cohen is a visiting faculty member at Bennington College and the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies in Kibbutz Keturah. Since 2000, he has divided his time between Vermont and Kibbutz Keturah, teaching classes on conflict resolution and different aspects of biblical studies. Rabbi Michael is a longtime environmental activist and has written extensively about the environment and the Middle East peace process. We also have Imam Abdullah Antepli today. He's the Associate Professor of the Practice of Interfaith Relations at Duke University. He's a leader of cross-religious and cross-cultural dialogue in American higher education and in the nonprofit world. He has built multiple organizations and initiatives to facilitate religious and spiritual life across America's college campuses, promoting understanding between religions, not only within the United States, but also beyond its borders. Shalom, salam, and thank you again for joining us. The first round of our discussion will be around three big questions. Number one is the current context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, followed by the question, is peace possible and how can peace be built? As well as the role of interfaith dialogue in the process of peace building and how can we use religion as a tool to make peace and not divide people more. And with that, Michael, I would like to quote some of very important ideas that you shared in one of your articles for Palestine Israel Journal. You talk there about how conflict resolution theories can offer us a different approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You mention emotional and psychological factors that come in play when we talk about the conflict. You talk about 5 pillars of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that need to be resolved, which are borders, security, refugees, natural resources, and Jerusalem. And you talk about the notion of the other as something that we need to address when talking about the peaceful resolution of the conflict. Michael, please tell us more about your views on Israeli-Palestinian peace, and let's discuss those 3 big questions as well mentioned before.
Thank you, Lika. So I have about 15 minutes in this section, right? Is that how this section's divided? Okay, I'll try to cover all of that there, and if I don't, we'll get to Q&A. So first, I want to thank Lika for having me, for Ramiz for also arranging for this, for seeing all of you, and it is an honor to be on this Zoom call with Imam Abdullah. I've heard so much about you, and so this is the first of many conversations you and I will have, and I look forward to us meeting together as well. So I guess I want to start with the notion of other, with a thought that if one looks at the stellar periodic table, that it's the periodic table of all the chemicals and materials and stars, it's what we're made out of. It's what the earth is made out of. That we are actually literally stardust. And if we keep this in mind, we can see our lives as an part of the unfolding story of the universe, a biocentric as opposed to an anthropocentric orientation towards things. And underlying that unity, that we all share all of this, that we come from the same stuff, is an interdependence that we have for each other. And that the illusion of difference is challenged by the basic stuff of the universe that we literally all physically share in our bodies, in our houses, in the trees outside. That understanding that reminds us of that interdependence says that when we're in conflict with somebody else, then on some level, I'm in conflict with myself. That the other is not the enemy, but the other is also me. That is really hard to hold. But if you can hold that, you can change the world. That clearly guided Gandhi, Mandela, King, and Malala today. And so I want to keep that as kind of an opening rubric of when we are in conflict, and conflict is how we sort out what needs to be done in life, that it doesn't become the other is the enemy. It's us. And we're in this together. We come from the same stuff. So that's kind of an opening piece I wanted to say. I was asked about the current situation in terms of the context of the conflict. So where we are today, we're in a standoff. That's the depressing sign. We've just had this horrible latest war between Hamas and Israel. There's a dysfunctional relationship between Hamas and Fatah. There's a dysfunctional relationship between Hamas, Fatah, and Israel. That's the bad news. But I think we're also at a moment of opportunity, if it's not lost, and we can take advantage of it. There is war fatigue. on both sides right now after this latest encounter. We have a new US administration, and in a few hours, we will have a new Israeli government with Bibi Netanyahu will no longer be the prime minister of Israel. Those three pieces create a moment right now. In addition, we know the present US administration does not want to go for an answer to this, which means we have time, and I think they're right, and nor does the present Israeli government with this broad coalition, which means we have time before we're going to have to grapple with the end questions. But the advantage there is, and this is what hasn't happened in the past, is it gives us time to till the soil, to create the right conditions so that the government leaders on both sides feel they have the voice of the people behind them. And two, we know whenever an agreement is reached, the pushback is going to be brutal and immense. And that core of Israelis and Palestinians who have an image of how things can be different are going to need to be strengthened. And so we have time now both to create the conditions and strengthen that group so that something holds when things are in place. What's fascinating right now is, in the present Israeli government now, it's an Islamic party that holds the balance of power of why this government is going to stay. That is an earthquake in terms of the setup of the relationships there. So how do we till the soil? And this is really where I come from in many ways from my work with the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies. I've been involved since its doors opened in 1996. We bring together Israelis, Palestinians, Jordanians, Moroccans, students from all over the world to be trained to become environmental leaders. There's internship options after undergraduate work. I invite all of you to apply or let people know about it, and I can later on or email me and I can certainly tell you more about it. I would say that in some ways where we are in the world today, the world is divided between fanatics and moderates, uber nationalists and human nationalists, cultural elitists versus cultural humility. And that is a quote of this wonderful Vermont leader, Keisha Ram. We should all have cultural humility. People who see the world as black and white versus those who accept the gray of complexity, the naysayers and the more optimists. That's the fault line in the world today that transcends Israelis, it transcends Palestinians, it transcends everybody. And that latter camp, the ones who understand complexity, who are more optimist, they need to have a stronger voice. Dr. Tarek Abu Hamid, a Palestinian, will become the new executive director of the Arava Institute for Environmental Studies August 1st. He will become the first Palestinian to run an academic institution in Israel. And he was recently on a talk where he said, we are the silent majority. Those of us who believe in this change, we are the silent majority. And we need to reclaim the conversation. We need to get better at doing that. In Amanda Ripley's fascinating book, High Conflict, Why We Get Trapped There and How We Get Out, she writes, just as the enemy gets dehumanized, they must be rehumanized. One of the things that we've learned at the Arava Institute is that trust. And that if you trust somebody, you can vehemently disagree with them, but you can imagine going forward to solve it because they're a human being. And that's part of the work that we need to do on the ground is we need to rehumanize the other in both directions. Much of that has to do with, I would argue, with the work of the 100 organizations of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. There are 100 organizations like the Aravins who are doing work on the ground, bringing people together. It's not easy, I can tell you that. The US government, you should be aware, in December, in one of the few acts of bipartisan political activity, passed the Nita Lowey Peace Builders Act. $50 million over the next 5 years, $250 million to upgrade the work of these organizations. The Europeans are in the process of adding their own 50, and we're hoping the rest of the world will add another 100. We'll have $200 million to uplift these groups. And we know in the conflict in Northern Ireland, we don't even spend a fraction on grassroots activity that created the conditions for the Good Friday Accords. I would argue that's the essential thing that needs to happen now if we're going to move anything forward to change the status quo, to get rid of the occupation, to create a lasting and just solution. is to work on the grassroots so that the political leaders understand they have the permission to make the very difficult decisions that they will. And so all of these pieces are in place now, these organizations, the fact that no one wants to run into an agreement right now, that gives us the time to be smart and take advantage of this and these activities to create the right conditions, but also create the conditions that will hold, because no matter what the final agreement is, there will be immense pushback. And that core of Israelis and Palestinians who believe in it are going to know that they are strengthened by one another and by their shared vision. In terms of interfaith group, I mean, it kind of goes without sense in terms of what I kind of said earlier. That was a very spiritual message, even though it was scientific, talking about stardust, if you will. And we know Rabbi Michael Melchior, you should Google him and go to his website, has been doing a tremendous amount of work over the years from a religious perspective. While we had the horrible riots in Jerusalem a couple of weeks ago that, in part led to this war, though not entirely, we know in the past that Melchior has worked with imams in Jerusalem when they heard things were going to get bad and were able to quell things down. There's a natural bridge between interfaith leaders that can be modeled for people on the ground. And I would argue that those interfaith voices that understand that difference is a bridge, they need to be listened to more, and they also need to take center stage more. I think there's a huge amount of work in the Hartman Institute where Imam Abdullah really models that. But one of the things that I've said for years about these groups, whether it's Arava or Hartman or whatever, we need to start expanding who we talk to. It's very easy to talk to people who think like us and agree with us. But we need to start taking the conversation out further. And we need to be strategic about that. And that's the other thing that we can do right now. So I think that's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael, for very inspirational thoughts and for being very mindful of time also. Imam Abdullah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning from North Carolina, and good afternoon or good night wherever you are joining from. Rabbi Michael has given us so much to reflect on, but briefly, I would like to go in the similar order. The current context and the recent cycle of violence in Aqsa and Gaza has brought us to one of many dark moments that we are in. Really, for Jewish-Muslim relations, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we are not in a very good situation. So the current unimpressive context, which I totally agree, peace is possible, we can pivot this into an opportunity, we can turn this crisis into some of the potential goodness with the new administration here, with the new government in Israel. But I think, first of all, this unimpressive picture before us has to humble us how complicated, how difficult the situation is. For those who think this is one of many similar conflicts around the world, this is about border, this is about land, there is so much trivializing of this problem. A lot of people, rather, they have some sort of a simplistic view. If for about 100 years, so many people are involved, one of the most brilliant minds of the world has been involved, superpowers are involved, there's so much goodness around the world, and this problem has not been solved. That means it's for a reason. It's not because people are dumb or they don't understand the problem. That means, A, the situation is way more complicated than many people realize. The second thing I want to say, if this problem has consistently gotten worse, I have been involved with this situation in my teenage years. I grew up as a pro-Palestinian Turkish Muslim in Turkey. I worked and lived in various refugee camps in Lebanon, Jordan, as well as in Palestine. Regretfully, with my heart bleeding, I have to report things have gotten consistently worse. So for reasonable people, rational people, logical people, sensible people, they have to realize if things have been consistently worse, despite all the efforts and energy and investment, that means we have to slow down and say, if we keep repeating the same things that we have been utilizing, In the words of Rabbi Einstein, if we have done all of whatever we have been doing and expecting a somehow different result, I think that's the definition of insanity. Not only we have to understand the situation is way more complicated than we realize. Secondly, the fact that we keep finding ourselves in this kind of unimpressive, heart-wrenching, painful cycles of violence, that means we have to step back and think of some creative ways, new ways of engaging, because the ways that we are strategies, methods, engagements, interfaith and secular and otherwise, it is not working. I love that Psalm. It's one of my favorite Psalms. In the Psalms, which is a holy text for Islam and Muslims as well as the Zabur for Prophet David, in so many ways, God says, Shiru Adonai Shir Chadash. Sing me some new songs. Glorify me with some new ways. Compose some new melodies. I love it. That means also partially being the old songs that we are singing is not working. The old ways of thinking, old ways of strategies. So I really, really hope the younger generation will take this message of not trivializing, not thinking simplistically. If you give them this much land, if you draw the border there, this is not how, this is a war of intangibles. This is a war of narratives. This is a war and conflict of not concrete elements. And the intangible, especially the religion and faith, needs to be given enough consideration if you are going to do something new, if you are going to sing some new songs in this Israeli-Palestinian conflict situation. I cannot, again, first we have to go into the value of hopelessness. We really have to understand how difficult and how dangerous where we are right now as far as Israeli-Palestinian conflict is concerned, before we climb up to the mountaintop of hope, peace, and reconciliation that we are talking about. I will try to answer in the interest of time the second and the third question at the same time. Regretfully, the role of faith in peacemaking, despite all the heartache, and I have a very heavy heart. Right before this Zoom yesterday, I'm in touch with a lot of people on the ground in Gaza and in Palestine. The situation is really heart-wrenching. I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that peace is possible because I believe in God, because God intervenes human history in often unexpected ways, and I believe in human history. If you look into human history, so many dark, impossible to resolve conflicts have been resolved. Just look at the 20th century of Christian-Jewish relationship in one generation. That's incredible. That's a miracle. We moved from gas chambers, Auschwitz, to where we are now. Relatively speaking, we came a long way in resolving, reconciling, and bringing peace in a context which was incredibly, we saw the worst and the best in the 20th century. So this is possible. One heartache that I have, unfortunately, the Holy Land, the conflict in the Holy Land, the aspect about the holy has not been as seriously considered and thought. There is a very interesting picture in my office when you guys come and see about 1970s peace process. There's a Palestinian negotiators and Israeli negotiators, and American ones are around the table, one of many failed peace processes they are discussing. But that picture, I hope it will come out respectfully. It really gives a very symbolic insight of what went wrong, why this wasn't well thought. Everybody's drinking wine and everybody is served shrimp cocktail. Again, I'm not judging anybody's personal practice, and I wouldn't care less how you practice your religion or what law you are observing and not observing. But that tells you that people around the table are coming from a background that's not acknowledging or understanding why this is a war of intangibles, why certain deep, sacred, religious imaginations need to be part of the conversation. Regretfully, the religious voices, religious movements, religious elements involved in Israeli-Palestinian conflict are two types. Either they are sources of hate, racism, chauvinism, or some sort of a righteous absolutism. It is all for nothing, or it is ineffective, shallow, kumbaya, sort of a utopian peace voices. I think the potential role of religion and interfaith conversations as force and source of effective peace and reconciliation and compromise has not been fully utilized. Religion is either represented by the lunatics on all sides, or it is represented by these hand-holding, kumbaya singing, sort of a utopian Isaiah piece that the lamb is lying down next to the lion and everything is going to be fine. But an effective and reasonable peace, effective and reasonable reconciliation, where religion throughout the history has resources in sort of forming and shaping people's ethics and morality, and therefore manifesting itself in policies. I will only give one example, and then we will open up for Q&A. Religion, when it's utilized, taught, and implemented well, they can make people realize that in a situation of conflict, ultimate justice is the biggest injustice. Ultimate justice is the biggest injustice. If you go and absolutely implement a justice, that means you will have to do a lot more injustices in order to achieve this justice. In order to achieve peace, and I'm saying, I hope it will come out very clearly, some aspect of justice needs to be suspended. Ultimate peace is going to be only achieved if some level of justice, sense of justice or injustices needs to be accepted by all sides. To achieve peace with strict and absolutist understanding of justice is going to keep making injustices that we have been seeing. Is there a way in which religions can inspire Jews, Christians, Muslims, and others to contract, to reevaluate their sense of justice? Is there a higher value? Is there a higher moral imperative that will humble us in our thinking of ultimate justice? If you keep thinking the justice will equally distribute well-being, prosperity, and peace to everybody, that means either you are smoking something that you shouldn't, or you don't understand the human history. So I want to explore the elements of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and maybe other world tradition, wisdom traditions. Is there a way in which we can reimagine the sense of justice by containing, by accompanying it with a sense of compromise for the sake of heaven, for the sake of higher values, is one of many examples where the role of religion, you look every aspect of these negotiations and peace processes, etc. It is mostly involved by people who really don't understand what this Holy Land means and how this Holy Land could be reimagined, where it's a place where many people worship God and sing different and new songs to God, Allah, Hashem, Almighty.
Thank you very much, Imam Abdullah. A very important thoughts to be shared with young people. And I kept thinking for myself how important it is what kind of teachers you will meet throughout your path, and how important it is what kind of information young people receive at a very young age, because we are lucky to be in this meeting today with both of you and hear this kind of conversation regarding the conflict. But a lot of our fellows from different parts of the world do not have this same opportunity, and they maybe do not meet the same teachers that would help them find themselves and hear the right voices of wisdom. That leads me to three other big questions that we brainstormed together to ask both of you, which will take roughly half an hour of our time. And after that, we can move forward to Q&A, where our friends in the chat can share their questions in the chat, but also we are live on Facebook, as I mentioned, and I want to tell to all our friends watching this right now, you are also welcome to share your questions in Facebook chats, and we will try to ask those questions in this in the last 30 minutes of the meeting. Still very, very big and very important topic of religion and the lens of interfaith friendship and dialogue to resolve this difficult conflict. Sharing from after talking about this conflict with a lot of peers in different parts of the world, I realized that a lot of young people see religion as a problem and not as a cure. And that is also an issue these days. We have young people of different faiths joining us today, and we also have non-believers joining us today. And I hope that we can touch the hearts of everyone, irrespective to who they believe in or what kind of belief system they have. And one more time, ask this question of religion as a cure and not as a problem, because young people these days, unfortunately, do see religion as a problem when we speak about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If both of you could maybe briefly share your views regarding this question.
Well, I'll start since I have the microphone, figuratively speaking, and then Michael will correct me or put more additional insights and information. For young people or old people who see religion part of the problem, first of all, they are correct, partially. First, we have to acknowledge that religion, as I said earlier, has not been, at its best, it's been ineffective. At its worst, it promoted violence, bloodshed, and it even fueled a fire in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or beyond. First, we have to acknowledge that criticism is absolutely spot on. But I think when religion can be a source of solution, requires, again, a very serious re-examination. Younger generation have an incredible opportunity. When I was so attracted to religion, until 20, 30 years ago, in order to get to the deep brain tissues of religious teachings, that was only accessible if you signed the membership form, if you are part of that tradition. The wisdom, the positive energy, transformational potential energy of religions were only available, not exclusive, but primarily available if you actually become the follower, practitioner, confessional believers of that particular faith tradition. You are living in a very interesting time where these millenniums-long accumulated wisdoms of faith traditions are now, because of the modern world, social media, academia in the West, is now accessible to all of you to learn and extract meaning and wisdom, but you don't have to. Again, you don't have to sign up the membership form. It doesn't mean you have to get into religious relativism. But I hope you will really take advantage of, can religion be a source of wisdom and conversation partner? Can the walls of synagogues and mosques and churches be transparent? Without people being forced to practice that religion, the deep sort of teachings of these religions can be open to people who are not followers of that faith, who are not practitioners of that faith. This creates a tremendous amount of opportunity. And this is a way in which, even if you think some manifestations of religion, some weird and violent and extremist interpretation of religion is a turnoff, there are other aspects of religion which should be taken seriously, which should be taken into consideration in thinking of peace, policy, resolution, and the mediating and negotiation. I don't think religion in this aspect, religion to be part of the solution, that potential of that religion as healing, as reconciling, needs to be taken into consideration, and that needs to be worked out not by the members of that religion, but the practitioners of that religion, by the human community at large. Michael?
I mean, yeah, religion can be a big problem. There was a fascinating show a year after 9/11 on PBS called Faith and Doubt After 9/11. I highly recommend it, Faith and Doubt After 9/11. And they do one section where they basically put religion on trial. And there's this powerful moment where there's a Franciscan monk who was living in New York at the time, who says, as he saw the images on the TV, he says, "Before they told me, I knew it was religious people did this." It's such a self-incriminating indictment of the dark side of religion. And we need to ask ourselves, why is that? You know, we know religion can do wonderful, great things, but it has this dark side. And one way to understand that is if we posit that God, Allah, is all powerful. And we know the quote from Lord Acton, "Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely." If you think you know what the absolute power of the world wants, that can become corrupting. And that's where religion can become dark. In the Christian Bible, the Jewish Bible, and the Quran, we have the story of Abraham bringing his son up to Mount Moriah to be offered as a sacrifice. The Quran, it's Ishmael. The Bible, it's Isaac, a whole interesting conversation in and of itself, an interfaith moment, actually. And often that story is read as Abraham is the perfect model of faith because he is willing to sacrifice, to kill in the name of God. And he's raised on a pedestal because of that. I think that's missing the point of the story. When Abraham is so fanatical that he's got the knife raised and he's ready to kill his son, in that moment of complete fanaticism, he still is able to hear that angel that says, "Don't harm your child." That's the antithesis, the anecdote in all religions that says, yes, we have a truth, we have a way that we understand the world, but if I go back to Kisha Ram, who I quoted earlier, we need to have cultural humility. We should have our passion, but we should always be open to others. And I would argue that religion has that voice saying always be open. And we need to nurture that because we've allowed religions to be hijacked by those voices that say different. What I talked about earlier, that split in the world between fanatics and non-fanatics. The world is black and white, the world is complex. And we need to strengthen those voices. And religion has that voice in it that we need to strengthen as well. And just to repeat what Imam Abdullah was saying, religion can be this powerful bridge because religion understands that we all come from one source, that we all come from one God, and that puts us in relationship. And if you ever go to an interfaith meeting, you feel that bridge between people. It's there automatically, it's tangible. There's a common language, even in disagreement, that overrides the moment of meeting. And that's where religion can be very, very powerful in this conflict, and I would argue many other conflicts as well.
If I may very quickly, this is not in no way disagreement to Michael. It's just echoing some aspects of what he beautifully articulated. So to cure for bad religion is not no religion, or solution to bad religion is not absolute secularism. The only way to cure bad religion is with good religion. What is a virus? What is a vaccine? What is a vaccine? Vaccine is the tamed version of the same disease that you put into your body, so your body will immune themselves. So first of all, to see the ugly manifestation of religion, which in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you really see there's so much there. The worst of Judaism, the worst of Islam, the worst of Christianity, when these four traditions somehow becomes evil, a source of death and destruction. The solution is to bring to these manifestations, to cure them with the best of Judaism, the best of Christianity, the best of Islam. A religion can only cure the straight aspect or the perverted interpretation of religion. This is one. I totally agree with Michael's sort of characterization or categorization of these two camps, the fanatics and the lunatics and the people. But I hope nobody says the problem is only the bad side. I hope the problem is not only these people who have gone astray. I think primarily the problem is our camp, because we are not as effective, because we are not as hardworking, we are not as determined, because we are not. I read Birmingham jail letter of MLK and weep all the time. I really hope you will read that letter again in the context of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The world is in mess, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is in this unimpressive condition. Yes, there are so many people guilty of harm, racism, and all the ugly stuff, but primarily because the good people are not working. The good people are not effective. Good people are not putting their money where their mouth is, or they are not as determined, as hardworking as the lunatics and the crazies of the world. So let's not just assign the guilt and responsibility to the bad people. We are in this situation because good people are not activating their goodness and putting into action. We are all responsible.
And if I can quickly add to that, and thank you so much for what you just said, we need to be much more proactive. We tend to be reactive, which means the other side controls where things are going. And we need to think more long-term than just short-term. And that's part of the ownership that Imam Abdullah is talking about, that we need to get better at.
Just to lighten the mood, if I can give an example, there's a very particular marginal, absolutely non-representative, radical extremist Christian community in the South. They are targeting me because I'm a public figure. They are consistently sending me literature and saying, basically, I will go to hell and God will barbecue me in the dungeons of hell. But it's unbelievable, the relentless messaging, like every single time, every single way. In a way, as much as I disagree with their theology and they don't represent the entire Christianity, I admire their persistence. I admire the discipline. How many people are as hardworking, as persistent, as relentless as these people? So we don't need moderates as long as they are lazy. We need some radical people. We need some radical, committed, fired up people who are willing to take their ethical, moral commitment of reconciliation and compromise, putting peace above anything, including justice, and relentlessly working in that direction.
Thank you both. So what important thoughts, and what a shame that there's never enough time. There's never enough time to talk about everything and ask all the questions. So I will try to be mindful of time, but also try to ask those important questions that we have prepared for both of you. And on that inspirational note, I would like to move on to a second question about building trust and about healing the wound. Imam Abdullah, Rabbi Michael, I do not think that there is a single person in this world who can watch the images of suffering on both sides and not feel moved and not feel this urge and need to help these people and stop this war and stop this conflict. I do not think that anyone can see the images of children suffering in Gaza. I do not think that anyone can look at the devastated buildings after the war. I do not think that there is anyone who can see the images of suicide bombings in Israel and not feel anything at all. And the question here is how we move forward and how we find a solution and how we heal the wound, because we have traumatized societies on both sides. We have a very deep-rooted national trauma on both sides. We have young children growing up in the shade of this conflict without seeing perspectives of anything getting better. We have young people, as I mentioned previously, thinking that peace is not possible. We have hopelessness, and that is a huge problem. And the question is, how do we build trust? Because right now what we have is, and I would like to use this metaphor of the other again, there are two sides, and both of them do not trust the other. And I would like to ask both of you, how can we heal that wound? How can we work on healing that wound?
Thank you, Lika.
And
Michael, why don't you start this one?
And quickly, since the time is running up, I will also ask the second one, because we can combine those two questions. And how can we young people be a part of that process of healing the wound? Because the UN has a resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security, and according to that resolution, young people play a huge role in peacemaking and peace building and peace negotiations. And that is a beautifully stated resolution, which unfortunately does not really happen in real life. And we need to work harder to make that a reality. So how can we heal the wound, and how can we young people, UN youth delegates, be a part of that process?
So I'll be short here, and I'll quote what I said earlier, this notion that we need to rehumanize the other. You're absolutely right. We need to build trust. Trust is not a simple thing to do, and why we're able to build it at the Arava Institute, I would argue, because we have a lot of pieces in place, and you can't just bring Israelis and Palestinians together and assume they're going to love each other. It's got to be very thoughtful, and that's the other piece, that if we're going to do this seriously and smartly and proactively, we have to think, how do we do it? It's a long-term engagement. I would argue, again, this is where the 100 organizations of the Alliance for Middle East Peace have a role to play. It's creating those contact moments, but it's doing it smartly so that people see the humanity of the other. I also think, and it's the psychological issues, that Lika, also mentioned, and that's what's under the table, and no one goes there. And until we start going to the psychological, the pain that people feel, the hurt, the anger, and fear is a real human, it's a survival mechanism. That fear is good. Both people want to survive. So we have to go there, that core human elements. And I think we also need to work on, some kind of statement where both sides acknowledge the pain they've caused each other, the missed opportunities, and how they need to go forward, and be very honest and open. I mean, that would, I think, say a lot if both sides were able to say that to each other. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Lika, you repeated how 16 times, and all of them are just, every how is $1 billion question. And it's not easy to answer. Again, there is no magical solution. There is not a switch button. Somehow, nobody figured it out that if you turn right, the things will be, or left, the problem will be resolved. But I think we have enough before us, how not to do this, how not to. So far, most of the strategies that we are utilizing, this ultra partisanship, seeing this as essentially a war or fight or conflict between good and evil, and my side is good, the other side is evil. So far, this is not solving anything. If anything, it's making things worse. If I may pick one, what is missing is, we are missing, especially among the leadership, organized leadership of our communities, is prophetic voices. We need people who have enough credibility and standing in their own community to be prophetic. Both Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is built on prophets. If you look at the prophets all over our tradition. And these prophets, when they came to their communities, none of them said, oh my God, you guys are amazing. You don't have to change anything. God is happy with you. You are doing all you need to do ethically and morally, and God is dancing in the heavens. These prophets came and said what needs to be said. And they said what people need to hear, not what they want to hear. Unfortunately, the moral courage and moral leadership and political, religious, civic, in every level, there is so much that people morally critiquing the other, but there is not enough morally critiquing self. And the second thing, in terms of how, and one of the most underutilized, is there any way in which, with no obligation to agree and acknowledge, can people spend more time trying to understand their quote unquote other or enemy? Is there a way in which we can at least keep basic human decency and curiosity, intellectual curiosity, still activated? That can I try to understand, again, with no obligation to agree? Is that this is exactly what we are doing at Shalom Hartman Institute. Like, can I make an attempt to see the world through your eyes? You know, even if you end up still disagreeing with that person, if you actually see and hear them, it creates a space in your mind and in your heart, and your reaction, your disagreement, manifestation of your disagreement is a lot more constructive and not destructive. To use the power of education, can we try to understand? I highly encourage people to read my colleague Yossi Klein Halevi's incredibly profound book, Letters to my Palestinian Neighbor, where he is trying to explain a Jewish, Zionist, Israeli narratives, and why this conflict is not about X, Y, and Z, but about deep collective imagination of his people. It's a profound way. Even if you disagree, I think you will get a sense to say this is not simplistically just a powerful, technologically, militarily, economically powerful nation just terrorizing people for no reason. As many people simplistically arrive in that conclusion.
If I can just add one quick to that great wisdom, Walt Whitman said, "Be curious, not judgmental." A guide for all of us.
And I am appalled and puzzled by why there is very little curiosity. You go to many pro-Palestinian Muslims, they care about this issue. They eat, think, dream, but they only consume one type of information. They know very little about why Israel matters to many Jews, why Zionism is a very essential part of a Jewish identity for a lot of the Jews, majority of the Jews. Like, if you care a lot about this, how would you not even try to make an attempt to understand? Similarly, you meet a lot of Jews who Israel matters to them greatly and admirably. But if you ask them how many Muslims they know, how much they know about Islam, what do they know about Aqsa, you meet people who grew up in Jerusalem, who sees Aqsa from the window of their homes and offices, and spend very little time to understand why is this place holy and sacred, why it sort of creates a deeper connection. Palestinian suffering is real. It's not fiction. It is Palestinian wound is bleeding, but it's not the only Muslim problem, and it's not the worst, quite honestly. But why throughout the world Muslims are reacting to this problem differently as they should? Would you not even be curious to understand why this is hitting and hurting one of the most deepest collective consciousness of the Muslim world of 1.8 billion people? It's quite appalling and puzzling. We need to activate that curiosity, again, with no obligation to agree or arrive to a consensus. It will be different if we make sense of each other better.
Definitely. And Imam Abdullah, you mentioned a book, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor. We read that book in one of Michael's classes. So that was very...
I am so glad. The book is phenomenal, but I hope you will try to understand. The way I met Yossi, his previous book, he spent 2 years, went into Palestinian mosques, Palestinian homes, Christian and Muslim. He made that journey. He wanted to understand his neighbors. So he earned that moral credibility now to explain himself to his neighbors. We need to make these journeys into each other's world and try to walk in the shoes of each other before we arrive into these conclusions.
Journeys into each other's worlds. That is a very important way of thinking about not just this conflict, but I think any conflict that we encounter in our lifetimes, personal lives and political lives. With that, we are actually doing really well with time, and I would like to announce that we're open for Q&A. We have a question from Asher Edelson, and I will let Asher unmute himself and actually ask the question himself. Asher, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lika. My question is this: how can we expect international peace talks to render fruit when the USA and Israel and Palestine will not formally recognize one another's statehood? I feel as though this must be an initial first step for peace talks to be serious at the international and political level. Thank you.
I mean, I believe in Oslo, the Palestinians did recognize the state of Israel, and it's implied within Oslo the other way. I think both sides, though, have done actions that negate the wholeness of those statements. And that's a piece of the puzzle. It's a piece of the puzzle.
Asher, as Michael said, there are so many formal recognitions of, it is not categorically true. There has been many peace talks where the Palestinians recognize Israel and they recognize formally the two-state solution and vice versa. I highly recommend a Palestinian polling center in Ramallah, Dr. Shikaki and Palestinian Polling Center. If somebody can Google his name and put the link here, it's incredible. This is partially also war of perceptions. They ask Israelis and Palestinians. This is a partnership polling by this Ramallah organization and Tel Aviv University. When they are asked over and over in different periods, a lot of the majority of Israeli Jews and Palestinians, they say, majority of my camp is willing to compromise. They want peace, but they don't. We want peace. We gave them an opportunity. We offered them. It's almost in same proportions. It's mind-boggling that how much clash of perceptions, disconnect is out there. But I think, as you alluded in your question, in order to these formal recognitions and recognitions and recognizing whatever people want to be recognized for, in order to these to be effective on the grassroots level, people have to find out a way to build trust and receive, take yes as an answer. There were many peace processes where people offered so much goodwill to each other, but it's so regretful that in so many instances, I can give so many examples, neither the Israeli side nor the Palestinian side, they just didn't know how to take yes as an answer.
We have a question from one of our network members. She is asking about your suggestions to our group in our network, since we have young people from very diverse backgrounds, from different religious backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and very different outlooks and very different views. How would you, what suggestions would you give to our group of young leaders on resolving conflicts and building a healthy culture of hearing each other and as you said, Imam Abdullah, going into each other's worlds when we come from so many different cultures and continents, and there is so much that is different about us. How can that be used as a power rather than something that would divide us? That was the question from one of our members.
That's a wonderful question. I suggest a couple of really practical suggestions. If you have followed this conflict, and in one way or another, even 51 to 49%, you feel pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian, I highly encourage spend more time trying to understand what you're against, instead of constantly consuming the partisanship of the camp that you agree for. Say if you're a pro-Palestinian Muslim, spend more time trying to understand the pro-Israeli Jews and how large spectrum diverse it is. Like what bigotry, bias, and hate does to people is you turn this complicated issue into a very simplistic white and black situation. It's simple. They are the aggressor, they are the perpetrators, and my people are the victim. It is not as simple. Spend more time reading, understanding, reflecting on the issue. For a lot of people in my camp, I consider myself as a pro-Palestinian Muslim, two-state solutionist. I think one of the major homework to understand the concept of Zionism, because through anger, frustration, through the Palestinian suffering, a lot of my people, members of my people, they turn Zionism into this incredibly ugly, equal to racism. It's the settler colonial ideology. Again, the way people sort of confine and homogenize Islam, jihad, violence, extremism in the same fashion. I really hope they will spend more time about understanding Israel, Zionism, Judaism, with its nuances. Again, with no obligation to agree, at least try to make sense of basic nuances. A lot of people, unfortunately, they know secular Zionism, a Zionism that born out of Auschwitz and Holocaust, etc. But they don't know a lot about the biblical Zionism. They don't know a lot about the religious Zionism, the Jewish people's deep connection to this homeland, spiritual ancestral homeland. I think they need to spend more time at least trying to make sense of that aspect of collective national identity. But for a lot of pro-Israeli, I hate these terms, but for the sake of argument, for those who are feeling a little bit more affinity and support and connection to Israel, I think what I see often is they sort of know and understand the Palestinians are suffering, but they haven't really internalized the depth and scale of that suffering. It's not only physical suffering. This is the people whose dreams have been shattered. Their collective identity have been wounded and stabbed through all sorts of events. So all the psychological, emotional, and tangible, deep human suffering, collective and individual. Again, not only physical, but also, I will never forget when we were asking one time an activist who were justifying suicide bombing, how do you justify this Islamically? There is nothing in Islam you can come close to justify killing yourself and innocent people at the same time. He said, you guys think occupation is Israeli soldiers' boot on my face. You think this is as if like somebody is putting their boots and feet on my face. The real occupation is their boots are in my heart, in my soul. So I think for those who are feeling a little bit more in line and in support of Israel and its policies, they really have to understand and internalize the depth and scale of the Palestinian suffering. This could be a wonderful way to learn, again, with no obligation to agree. But I think if you spend more time trying to understand this, your reaction, your perception will be different. Michael?
Thank you, Imam Abdullah. Yeah, what you said about these labels of pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian don't help us. I consider myself a Zionist, but I would not label myself as pro-Israeli. I'm pro-solution. And these labels, these silos do not help us at all. Since we're here to bring a religious message, one of the things I love in the Talmud is rabbis were paired together in the Talmud, which is the ancient rabbinic discussions of Jewish law, who not agreed with each other, but disagreed with each other. Hillel and Shammai, Rav and Shmuel, et cetera, et cetera. Because when you meet someone who disagrees with you, you might learn you're wrong, or they might learn they're wrong. Or maybe you reach a compromise in how you understand things. Or maybe you learn to fine tune your arguments. We need to get away from this notion of someone we disagree with is an enemy to be crushed. As Imam Abdallah says, we need to be curious why someone thinks that way. That's part of our great challenge here. In terms of, as I said earlier, having an opinion, but being open is so important. So right by my desk here, every day, I have this stone. It's from a Palestinian house that was demolished by Israelis. And I went to help rebuild that house with a Palestinian family. This reminds me every day of the tragedy of that conflict from the other side, if you will. In terms of learning those different voices, there are a number of opportunities. There's a great book called Side by Side, was written by Dr. Sami Adwan of Bethlehem University and Dr. Baron at Ben Gurion University, where it's 100 years of the conflict, and you go through the book, and it's this side is the Israeli version, this side is the Palestinian version. And it's 100-page, more of that, and you get to hear both voices. It's so important we understand. There's a conflict resolution theory called positions, interests, needs. This position here, that position there, they're diametrically opposed. But if you think of them as coming of triangles and the triangles overlap, there's shared interest and there's shared needs. The interest and needs informs people's positions. If you can learn what someone's interests are and what their needs are, and you find a common interest and need, you also start the conversation there. But you can only do that by understanding the other side. And that's part of the challenge to move this forward. And that's a mechanism for one way to do that.
Very, very powerful thoughts. And as a psychology student, psychology and conflict resolution, but mostly from my psychology student perspective, emotions do get in the way of really being able to breathe and think in the direction that you, Michael, and Imam Abdullah are showing us to think in. With that, another question from Joaquin Paredes Arenda. The question is, how do you see the future of diplomacy and the role of today's youth in building peace around the world?
Diplomacy by itself, as we have seen for the last 100 years, is not going to solve this problem. Diplomacy needs to be helped and equipped and empowered by various actors, including religious ones and religious institutions and religious imaginations and religious communities. Again, I think, as I mentioned earlier, if you think this is just a real estate problem, and somehow some brilliant diplomats and Richard Holbrooks and Madeleine Albrights and will just put their acts together, I really hope we will find a different generation of diplomats who really are humble enough that this is not a problem that could be solved in a negotiation room. That I will hope we will produce a different kind of sophisticated, cosmopolitan, effective diplomats who understand the solution is outside of the room. The solution is in the grassroots level of changing the hearts and minds of the people and using and utilizing everything within their disposable, especially religion. I think, as I said, religion is not in the tool set or the skill set of many, many diplomats. They don't even think it's relevant. They think it's part of the problem. At its best, they can avoid it. I hope we will find these sophisticated diplomats. They can navigate the Holy Land with some aspect of holy, with some aspect of sacredness, and through that they will change the hearts and minds. By the time diplomats are trying to solve this problem, that's the final phase in this potential peacemaking, not the beginning. We need diplomats when the hearts and minds are ready to actually commit to. First, we have to build that willingness and that peace and that reconciliation, again, in the hearts and minds of Palestinians and Jews in the region and around the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, diplomatically, like I mentioned, we're at a moment now, we have a new American administration. In a few minutes or hours, we're going to have a new Israeli government, and there may be some shifting there on the diplomatic front. But Imam Abdullah is absolutely right, and it's what I've been living for 25 years. The answer in many ways really lies in, and so track one are government to government talking, track two are NGOs, academic institutions, grassroots, track three. That's where it's going to happen. That's where it's going to be built. So at the Arava Institute, about 5 years ago, we established a track two environmental forum where we realized we on the track two level have something to teach the track one diplomats. So we created this track two environmental forum, or applied environmental diplomacy. And we're getting stuff. We are working in Gaza. We are bringing water gen machines which take the water out of the air and create clean drinking water. We're bringing wastewater management into Gaza. We're bringing solar fields into Gaza. We've connected a wastewater pipe from Ramallah to the Jordan Valley for Palestinians because we could work at the track two level with the parties that couldn't get along. On the track two and the track three level, that is where work needs to be done. And that's where youth can have a real influence and a real foothold in helping that kind of work to be done.
Thank you. And while we're approaching to the end of our meeting, I have a question actually. I don't see more questions in our chat, and I think that it's appropriate to ask this by the end of our meeting. It's not an easy question, but I don't think that any of the questions that we've been discussing today are easy to discuss. My question comes from the perspective of talking about the conflict to a lot of young people in different setups in different parts of the world, talking to my friends about the conflict, talking about the conflict in our network. The question is, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear to talk about this conflict. There is a lot of fear of uncomfortable conversations. And then there is also this notion of, I will not come to the negotiating table, or I will not come and engage in this conversation. That is difficult because that way it is hard to even discuss the possibilities of peace when people do not wish to simply even come to a discussion table. So my question is to also both of you, another advice to us as a team of young leaders. How do we find a way to create safe spaces where people will not be as afraid to ask their questions and talk about not only this conflict, but conflict in general? And how do we go beyond, I am not going to talk to you, and I do not wish to even hear your opinion, because that is very, very difficult to then talk about. That makes very difficult to talk about peace in any case or form.
Yeah, you and your wonderful how questions, Lika. You seem to ask these the heart of the matter questions. I have a couple of practical suggestions. If you are not Palestinian or Israeli, and if you don't live in the region, one of the obstacles and hindrances is the hermeneutics get in the way. Here you are in the United States, you are an American, you have American lenses and American sensibilities, and you're trying to make sense of an international conflict, instead of trying to understand this international conflict in its own context, through its own realities, you Americanize, you Russianize, you Georgiaize this problem. There is so much, unfortunately, destructive, unhelpful, toxic, dangerous, as if Israelis and Palestinians don't have enough their own problems. You just reflect and you project your own issues on them. It becomes about you. There's so much unhelpful language about conflating African-American experience with Palestinians and equating Zionism with white supremacy. And then it's not about that problem anymore. Or you take apartheid South Africa and you copy that experience culturally, politically, historically, all different experience, and paste it to Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And you make problem even more unsolvable, a lot more conflict. I mean, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we've been talking about this, it's complicated enough. And bringing unhelpful international and importing other lenses, and through these prisms, trying to make sense of this problem, makes it even a lot more unsolvable, more irreconcilable. So the first thing I will say to people like us who don't live in the area, Jews and Palestinians, Israelis and Palestinians, they have enough problems. Don't add your own on top of what they have. And try to see and understand this problem in its own real, complicated context by not conflating some international flavors of whatever you choose. This is one important aspect. I think a lot of people, when I see many social justice issues in the United States spilling over to this and says this is all the same thing, it makes so much injustice to the very unique and incredibly different nuances of each and every conflict. I wouldn't ask you to do the same. This seems to be a great challenge. I don't know if you agree, Michael, of this young, woke social justice generation. You are muted.
You said what needed to be said. It is so, that nuance of what you said is so vitally important. And the problem is we are living in a society today, in part because of these, where we live in this quick reductionist analysis of the world is oppressor and oppressed. And you're either here or you're there. And if you're there, you're bad. And it's this simplistic reductionism that we need to get beyond. That's a much larger cultural zeitgeist question. So I can't thank you enough for what you just said. You need to write an op-ed piece about that, by the way. Related, we talk about bringing people together to talk about difficult conflicts. You can't have a relationship about this, right? You can't have a relationship about a conflict. And one of the things that I would argue why things work well at Arava and why we're able to have difficult conversations, well, people will get angry at each other, but still we see long-term personal and professional relationships. They have other touch points. They're taking classes together, they're sharing their music together, they're hiking together, they're cooking together, they're sharing their religious holidays together. They get to create the human of the other side. They get to build trust. So I would say before you, whatever, and it's in groups anywhere around the world, if you want to tackle any difficult issue, whether it's in your community or the Middle East, you have to create relationships that trust each other, that have an understanding so you can go to these difficult conversations. If you go to these difficult conversations, it's going to unravel first. You've got to create the right conditions to allow those conversations to take place if you want any kind of production that's positive to come out of it and helpful.
Absolutely. Another great advice is, I love that term, if your religion makes you hate other people, you need a new religion. And if your current ideological, religious, spiritual, ethical, and moral situation makes you feel that categorically the entire other side is unreasonable, and they choose violence, death, and destruction just for no reason. And this is, again, essentially a fight between good and evil, and my side is purely good and the other side is all evil. If that's even you're coming close to, that means you need a different teacher, different ideology, different mentors. That means you're not in a very healthy state.
Thank you. Thank you. All valuable advices and thoughts. And lucky are those young people who will be able to call you mentors and their professors. And I do believe that education is the key, and what we teach young generations at an early age is influencing the adults that they are going to be. And education is the key, and conflict resolution education and peace education is the key to long-term solutions for not just this Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but all conflicts within our hearts and beyond. I do believe that, again, as a psychology student, a lot of conflict starts here, and then it projects to the world outside, which is very unfortunate. But I do believe, and I'm sure that our friends in the network and in our colleges and networks in our countries also believe that peace is possible, and it definitely starts here. As we are concluding our meeting, I would like to share a quote that, as cliche as it might sound, to share a quote in the end of a meeting, I would like to share this quote by Ernest Hemingway that I came across a couple of days ago and found very, very to the point and important. Never think that war, no matter how necessary nor how justified, is not a crime. And as a last thought, I would hope that when we hang up this call and when we go back to our ordinary lives, we will all remember that peace is possible. The name of this talk was question mark. In the end, is peace possible? And I do hope that after leaving this call, we will say that yes, it is, but it is found in our hearts, in our souls. And it starts with us, every single one of us.
Indeed, not only possible, it is a moral imperative on us to pursue peace and keep peace as the highest ranking sacred value on top of all values.
Definitely.
It's interesting in the Psalms, it says you should seek peace and pursue it. All the other mitzvot, it says like, do it. Peace you have to pursue. It's active. And that's part of our challenge. And peace is not passive, as Hubert Humphrey would say. It's active. It's power.
Indeed. And thank you, all these young souls around the world, defeating despair, defeating apathy, defeating social media buzz, and still trying to engage in a meaningful way. I commend you, Lika, and all of you here. Keep up the good work and don't repeat the mistakes of our generation.
Thank you. It is not easy. It is not easy, but Ramiz, myself, and our wonderful team is working really hard to make that happen. And as we started this meeting with hello, shalom, peace upon you, salam, shalom, maybe we should also end it with those words in all the languages. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone. Very nice to meet you, Michael.
Amazing.
A pleasure.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Bye, everyone.